For me, my foundation is attitude, stay positive, avoid negative, passion. Whatever I do, I give it 125%, and work ethic. What follows that is success.
Have you ever wondered how some people seem to defy aging, staying strong, active, and full of energy well into their later years? Today, we're sitting down with John A. Brink, an 84-year-old competitive bodybuilder who's not just surviving, but thriving. Beyond bodybuilding and writing, John's a successful entrepreneur running multiple businesses. How does someone get to this point? What's the trick to living longer and healthier without losing your spark? John shares the real deal on what keeps him going. We'll dig into the daily habits he swears by and why strength training is a cornerstone of his life. He'll also break down how he tackles the mental side of staying fit, especially with barriers like pack schedules. No fluff, just practical insights from a guy who's living it. Curious about how to age with strength and grit? Stick around. John's story might just inspire you to rethink what's possible. Hey, good afternoon, John. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Pleasure being here.
Yes, sir. I know you have a lot in your life that you've accomplished. And for people who are listening only, obviously, John is 84 and in incredible shape. At least I think this would be a fun conversation in general, just for people who, want to understand like what your secret is. Just jumping right into it. I guess like the question on my mind and people listening is like, do you have a secret?
No, the secret is staying active mentally, physically. No particular secrets. So what I try to do, lots of sunshine or vitamin D, lots of sleep, 8 to 9 hours, exercise, and healthy diet, and staying mentally and physically active.
Yeah, I can tell, you're physically active for sure. And we'll get into the bodybuilding, of course. When you say like 8 to 9 hours, a lot of people will say, okay, adults really need 6 to 7. Have you always stuck to that, from a very young age?
No, I didn't. I didn't need that when I was much younger. But in the last 5, 10 years, I've gradually moved it up from to at least 8 hours to now. What I do usually try to do is 8 to 9 hours, and that makes me feel comfortable. At the same time, I'm very, very active. What I do is I get up at 5:30 in the morning, always make my bed, and I always think I'm late,
Okay.
and that's what I do.
Yeah, I was going to ask, did you have a certain time where you go to bed every night? Because a lot of people will say that consistency is what helps.
Yeah, usually I go to bed at between 9 and 9:30.
Hmm. Okay, and then you get your 8 to 9 hours from there. Have you always been in good shape? I know your background and upbringing and military service at your father, and there's a lot going on in terms of like you got started at a very young age. But have you always been in shape, or did you say, okay, later in life, I'm going to adopt this lifestyle?
No, there is always a trigger that kind of brings your attention to fitness and health and longevity. When I was 58 years old in 2008, or 68 years old rather, I got a case of diverticulitis that nearly killed me. So I came that close. And so in 2009 or 2008, got an operation because it ruptured and it's extremely delicate. And so when I recovered from that operation, I started to take things much more serious in terms of fitness and health and so from that point forward, I became much, much, much more active. My wife is a vegetarian. I didn't listen to her as well as I could have, should have, although I was not totally abusive, but I'm not as careful as I should have been. The other thing that I did before that, I was just like most people. At the end of the year, we decide to do this, that, this one, and that one. And one of them usually includes going to the gym. And then you go for 2 weeks, and then you can find 100 reasons why you're too busy to go to the gym. And so I took it much more serious. I got a trainer, started training in 2009. After doing that for about 5, 6 years, somebody came up to us and say, "Hey, John, have you ever thought about competing?" And I said, "Me? Yeah, you." I said, "Well, why not?" And so I started taking training even more serious. and started training bodybuilding and physique. And the first competition I did is in 2017. Competed in northern British Columbia and became second bodybuilding, third in physique. Qualified me for the provincials. Did about the same there, then the nationals, and then the Arnold. And then COVID came. And so could not go to the gym anymore, but I still stayed active. Now again, 2 years of COVID. Now again, I'm training again for the Arnold's, and I plan to go there in 2025.
Right. Wow, that's incredible. So yours was more. So yours was more of a wake up call, like obviously the operation and not listening to your spouse and giving you that advice. Is she still a vegetarian or?
Yeah, very much so.
Okay, so and is your diet more, is it balanced, or do you stick to that sort of vegetarian lifestyle?
I would say I'm more vegan, but getting more and more closer to being a vegetarian. So I used to say I'm 80-20 vegan, and now I'm probably 90-10-ish. The amazing thing is I do all the shopping, and even for her. And so when I go to the grocery store, I stay on the outside. Where inside, where the aisles are, all the food is prepared or super prepared, and you don't know what is in it. We stay away from that. So mainly do fresh vegetables, organic preferably. Always check it very carefully where they came from, and so being a lot more careful about that. So that's kind of what we do.
How about when it comes to little things? Like, are you into, all right, maybe taking a walk? You're saying obviously sleep and these very, very important things, but do you see like in your diet, maybe small things that we might think are not important, but that gradually build up over time, over the long haul, to help you get to being what you're able to do at your age?
Yeah, I'm very conscientious about what I eat, and then obviously going to the gym to me is very, very important. But I stay with primarily with vegetables and greens, organic preferably. And if we buy something else, we always want to make sure we know where it came from. So I'm very conscientious about what I put in my body.
People listening with kids, adults, younger children might be. The trick is, and you already had a spouse that was already on board and you just weren't listening, right? But for someone who is trying to sort of get their spouse to understand, like, this is a really important thing. And I don't know, like, when it comes to meat, was it something that your wife brought you, where you were eating meat at that time? How did that make you feel when you sort of went cold turkey? Was it an adjustment phase where you were still craving that, or how difficult was that for you?
It was a bit of an adjustment, but not really. There was no question about it that I had to be convinced that what would be good for me and for my lifestyle. So it was a bit of a period that I went through, but relatively small in the scope of things, but really kind of got my attention of getting this close to dying in 2008.
Yeah, you're right. People struggle to make these health decisions a priority. The mindset shift for you seemingly was a lot easier because you had that wake up call, like, I need to do this. But for people listening that don't really feel that they need to change, but we all know we all need to make adjustments, right? Like, what advice would you have to people to say, to take a look at? What would be the place you would start?
Well, start by watching podcasts like these ones, and people like myself read their books and see what made them become healthier, and also accept the fact that I was not perfect either in terms of being conscientious of my fitness and health in particular. So I got a wake-up call. I would hope that coming this close to dying is not the trigger for most people, but on the other hand, by watching people like myself and other people, including yourself, that are actively involved in fitness and health and quality of life in particular. Health is, I wrote a book about it that you likely are familiar with, Living Young, Dying Old. And that's a picture of me, actually, fairly recently. And I'm still in training again to go compete in the Arnolds. And the book is not necessarily about that, but saying that everything is possible. So, and for me, this is the result of starting fairly late, but then becoming very committed to diet and fitness, and especially not only walking and those activities, that's important, but also do some strength training that gives you stability. So as a result of this, I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America.
That's incredible.
I believe, I'm not saying that everybody should, but saying that too often I hear, Joe, that people say to me, well, I'm 45 and I'm too old. No, you're not. You're never too old. You can do this at any time. Doesn't mean that you have to become an Olympian or a bodybuilder like me, but at least understand it. Don't make it too complicated. Watch out for your diet. Sunshine is good, and vitamin D is very important. Then the other part, very important, is sleep, 8 to 9 hours a night. The other part that is important is diet, and stay with the greens. If processed foods are super processed, if you don't know what is in it, it likely is not good. So I would stay away from that, and then stay with greens preferably. And then stay fit and positive. For me, my foundation is attitude, stay positive, avoid negative, passion. Whatever I do, I give it 125%, and work ethic. What follows that is success.
Speaking of that, mental fortitude, your background, your upbringing from a young child, right? How much of that, PTSD, everything that you've been through, how much of that plays into how disciplined you can be at this point?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Obviously, you're already familiar with, I was born in November 1940 in northeastern Holland, just before the war started. And we saw far too much that we should not have seen. Things were tough. My dad had been called into the Dutch army in April of 1940, and then for 5 years we wouldn't know if he lived or died, because the last time they saw him was before the bombing of Rotterdam. He did survive, and we again got together with him again as a family after the war was over, but things were never the same again. And never the same again for him or for our family. So I say to a lot of people that are watching wars and that have not been part of it, fortunately, in most cases, but it taught me a lot of things that, once the war is over, things don't get back to normal, if you wish. It may take generations, as it did for us. The family was never the same again. Neither was Holland or the other countries where there are wars. Neither will be in the Ukraine or Eastern Europe, Middle East, or South America, where they're living under dictatorships. Those countries will never be the same again, even if they became democratic. And there is always a danger of appreciating democratic rules. And we have always admired, I'm a Canadian now, but I was born in Holland. We were liberated by the Allied forces that landed in Normandy, the United States, Canada, and a number of other countries that created freedom for us in Europe, and then followed up with the Marshall Plan, 1947, that again rebuilt Western Europe in democratic rule. And so we have always admired the United States as the example in the world, as the leader in democratic rule. And then the United States Constitution, and it starts with we the people, not I the dictator. And hopefully I'm have, and as most people do around the world right now, have some concerns about the United States, and that again is politics, obviously, and I'm not involved. I don't want to get involved in that, but we all get the message is that freedom is precious. And so if we do not have democratic rule and things go in the other direction, then that is not very good for any of us. So from that period forward, that we were liberated by the Canadian Army, April the 12th, 1945, and I saw far too much that we should not have seen. Always stayed with me. I'm still PTSD, even still now, affected by the inner child, which means the little boy, that anxiety of losing his only parent, the mom, and then seeing people being dragged out of their houses and people being killed and shot right by our houses. Saw far too much that we should not have seen. And then very much appreciated about, in our case, the liberation by the Canadian Army. And I knew from that point forward, once I grew up, I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And I did. I wanted to go when I was 17. And they said, no, you're too young, my parents. And so then I was drafted into the Dutch Air Force for 2 years. And then I went to Canada when I was 24. And I wanted to start with nothing. And so I could speak the language, didn't know soul, didn't have nothing. I had the suitcase, 2 books, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and very little money with me. I landed in Montreal and then took the train across Canada. 4 nights, 5 days, 4 nights. Can you believe it? It's such a long way to go. But I knew I wanted to build a lumber mill, and so I wanted to go to British Columbia where all the timber is. I stopped and ended up in Vancouver, went to the immigration department, and fortunately there was a German fellow. I could speak German.
That's good.
And I told him I want to build a lumber mill. He said, go to Prince George. That's where it is, 12, 13 hours. Prince George is 500 miles north of Vancouver. And so I did that 13 hours in a Greyhound bus. And now 60 years later, I'm still in Prince George today. And I came off the bus with my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, could speak the language, didn't know soul, didn't know anybody. And counted my money at least 3 times. I had $25.47. And what I had is attitude. I'm always positive. I avoid negative. Passion. I work harder, and then work ethic. I work harder than anybody, as I said earlier. But it's the land of opportunity. And then from that point forward, did I build a mill? Yes, I did. And did I do other companies? A whole lot of companies. But it's not about that. Those things are all secondary. The other thing that was important to me is that I was not academically successful. I failed grade 3. I failed grade 7 3 times. And so they said to my parents, who were beautiful people, other people said to my parents, he will never amount to anything, so he should get himself a labor job. And so, or maybe send them to the mentally challenged school. He said, no, we're not going to do that. So they found me a job in the furniture factory at 12 and a half years old. And so that's what I became, a furniture maker. But the kids that I went to school with in grade 7 went on to the college and university, and I became a laborer. I'm proud of that today, but then it was kind of looked down on. But I always knew I was different, and I didn't know why. And so then even when I went to Canada, and I already was successful here very quickly, I was barely here for 6 months, and I was already supervisor. And it was in a year I was superintendent of one of the largest sawmills here in northern British Columbia. But I still did not feel positive about myself until I walked into a store one day after I was here for 32 years, and I picked up a book, and the title of the book was Driven to Distraction by Dr. Halliwell. Don't know why I picked up the book. And as I looked at the book, it was about ADHD. And I said, oh my God, that's me. And so the more I read about the book, the more I looked at the history behind ADHD, the more it became clear to me that it is a superpower. And the frequency of occurrence initially I thought would maybe be around 8% or 10%. This was in 1997 when I picked up that book, January 1997. In my studio, I'm not there now, but I have a copy of the actual book, Driven to Distraction, written by Dr. Halliwell. And Dr. Halliwell has written 18 books. But he is also dyslexia and ADHD, and so am I. And now the other part about it is I'm also very active in podcasting, as you likely know.
Yeah.
I've nearly done 400 podcasts. Now my podcast number 203, On the Brink, I did a podcast with Dr. Halliwell that wrote that book in 1993. I bought it in 1997, January of 19, and it changed my life. And so the more I found out about it, it not only changed my life, I knew from that point forward that yes, indeed, it's a superpower. I've written now 6, 7, 8 books, and then including one that is about ADHD, because I believe that at the time that I started this, that it was not very much accepted. It was still looked at as a liability. I believe it is an advantage and it has potential. And if you know that you have it, how you can use it and apply it to your life creates major opportunities. And so that then I felt I had to write about it, speak about it, and I still do that today. Hence the book that I wrote about it as one of them that I thought was very, very important. And obviously, but it's happened now. People have become much more aware of it. Now, if the people watching us interested in ADHD, when I did the interview podcast with Dr. Hollywell on the Brink 203, I suggested to Dr. Hollywell, although he's the expert, but I lived it as well, is that I believe that the frequency of occurrence is likely around 20%. He said, no, John, it's more like 25%. I agree with them. The other thing that I suggested to Dr. Hollywell, I've been in business for a long time. I've done a lot of things in business, being involved with lots of successful businessmen, entrepreneurs, organizations, and have met a lot of people that are successful. I believe that up to 50% of them are ADHD. Dr. Halliwell said, no, John, probably 75%. I agree with, you know, so that part had a major influence in my life, and it changed me in a lot of ways. The other part did to share that with you as well. The other thing, so the things that changed my life is the war years, the Canadian Army that liberated us and gave me the dream of going to Canada. The next one, knowing that I'm just as smart as everybody else, not smarter than, not better than, but I had to start anew again. And Holland is always, no matter what happens, there's always a question, where are your diplomas? I didn't have any diplomas. And if I start in Canada, nobody has ever asked me for my diplomas. So I felt I had to start over new again to prove to me that why am I who I am? And so when I picked up the book from Dr. Halliwell, that opened the door. The other part, Joe, that was major to me in my life and that made changes is I was not a good communicator, even with all the companies that I had. And people said, oh, you're so successful and blah, blah, blah. I didn't feel that way, you know. And so that was already in late 1980 when I started to build my companies. And then a friend, sister of my ex-wife, actually said to me, hey, John, why don't you go with me to Toastmasters? I said, well, what is that all about? She said, about developing communication skills. I said, are they going to ask me any questions? Because if they say yes, then I would say, no, I'm not going. You just sit there and then if you want to, you can join it and blah, blah, blah. And so I was there and listened to it. And then halfway through the meeting, somebody said, hey, John, tell us all about you. I said, oh, my God, I'll never go back here. I did. I stayed there for 10 years, became a distinguished Toastmaster. That is the highest level of Toastmasters. And for all the people watching us from around the world, Toastmasters mainly in North America, but also in Europe and in other areas. Probably as we speak, probably there are at least 500,000 people actively involved in Toastmasters in all communities, no matter where we are in North America. And there is different levels. It's not only about becoming a presenter or a speaker, but it's about listening and creating confidence in speaking and thinking on your feet, and then create that confidence, and then qualifying to create presentations and all those things. So that combination of all of that I was in Toastmasters in 1990 to 2000. Add to that the ADHD in 1997. It changed my life. From that point forward, now I'm already then, 60 years plus old, and then I started to think about, a lot of people said to me, hey, John, you should write a book. And so writing books is not easy. And so for a long time, for about 20 years, I stopped and I started and I stopped and I started. And then I knew if I didn't do it now, about 6, 7 years ago, and now it's 85, I was already, well into my 70s. I thought if I don't do it now, it will never happen. So I wrote this book, Against All Odds. And so it's not about how successful John is, but all the ups and downs along the way. So it took me 80 years to live and 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it. And it has become very, very successful. The other one, obviously, is ADHD. That became successful. Then the other book that I have is I was watching a program on a U.S. channel, actually, and the interviewers suggested that 75% of the people that work in the United States, and I believe Canada is the same, don't like the jobs.
Mm-hmm.
70% of the 75 are looking for another job. And I say, finding your passion and liking to do what you do is critical in terms of good health, fitness, and all the other things that we are talking about as an element that is critically important. For me, I've worked from the time that I was 12 till now I'm nearly 85, for 72 or 73 years, and saying, are you living the dream, John? Yes, I am. And that's critically important. So I felt I had to write a book about that. It's saying finding your passion, living the dream. And if you want to be a truck driver, talk to truck drivers and see what's involved. How about owning the truck? How about this? How about that? If you want to be a carpenter, talk to a carpenter. You want to be a contractor, talk to a contractor. What is involved? Here, there. You want to be a lawyer, talk to a lawyer. You want to be a doc, talk to a doc, and on and on and on and on. A lot of those people, if you want to be an entrepreneur, talk to entrepreneurs. A lot of them like to share their experience with you, and it would give you, not you, but you in a general sense, a better idea of what will I like, what is more suited for me, and it becomes critically important that as you go further in life, that you, by and large, like the things that you do. And so that's why I wrote that book. And then the other one I showed you already, Living Young, Dying Old. And the issue here, more than anything, is not about age. It's quality of life. This book came out less than 6, 8 months ago. And then communications is so critically important that I'm writing another book right now that will come out in June. It's already in the first draft, and I'm still working on that. And this is the title, and this is what it looks like. In the end, a lot of people say to me, how do you do all these things? You have 10 companies,
Right.
and you're writing all the books, and you're doing all the podcasting, and you're doing how do you do it? I said, ADHD, that's how I do it.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to say. It sounds like part of it is mentally stimulating yourself over the years, making sure that you're always chasing something that keeps you interested. Do you ever find that yourself personally have a hard time sticking to, obviously, what happened with your health years back, but have you ever felt like, oh, I just need to try something new, or you're sticking with what you're doing?
Absolutely, no question. I love going to the gym. Although when I go there, I want them to push me to the limit. That's what I do myself already. And I go, I'm not trying to be important, but I'm usually very, very busy. But I will not, under extreme circumstances, I may have to skip a workout, but then I try to make up for it. But otherwise, no, I love going to the gym. And then by the time I'm done, I always feel that rewarding feeling. And then if you stay the course, do not give up. And as you do, you start to feel better. And then it becomes like the last decade of your life. The chances of those being that you can enjoy those is that much greater. And that's what I do is that, now 84 and a half, I have still lots of dreams in my companies that I do. I'm still writing the book. This one is coming out in June. I'm going to start another book. That's an interesting one. The title is You Can. And so that will come out the following June. And at the same time, I'm podcasting. I'm closely to 400 podcasts. We're approaching 800,000 subscribers on YouTube. And then I'm going to start a platform.
That's wonderful. And what about when it comes to social circles? Like, do you have a strong friend base, or is it stronger with your spouse and your sort of your companies or maybe your children? Like, how do you sort of balance that side as well?
Well, I probably work 10 to 12 hours a day, so I'm usually here at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the mornings, and then I leave usually at between 5 and 6. I'm usually the first one here, last one to leave. And then I go home and then I have something to eat, and then I may go back. I may be working on some of my projects. I don't do a lot of socializing, and that's not that I'm antisocial, but I'm so busy doing other things that I love to do.
So the mental stimulation is coming from what your day to day, and then
Yeah.
are you sneaking your workout in the midday, or do you do it in the morning
I do
before?
it. I do it actually on the midday. I usually go at 11 o'clock to the gym, and then to do it for an hour. Work with my trainer. That fits me best. Mostly in the mornings, I like to kind of check what all the companies are doing, what's happening, and on and on and on and on. So that's been my routine. So
Yeah.
and I like that.
How about when it comes to eating, though? Is there a routine there? Is it breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or do you do more small incremental meals throughout the day?
I like the question. So usually what I do in the morning, I have 3 eggs and an avocado, or if I don't have avocados, I have 4 boiled eggs, and that's my breakfast. And then I go to the gym between 11 and 12, and then I have one of the large protein drinks with double protein. That is my lunch. And then in the evening, I have something more that has more substance to it. And maybe I do some chicken and I do fish, but not meat. And then it's either a salad or something like that. And then I may go out 2 or 3 times a week, for eating dinner out somewhere.
I think the key takeaway here is that you're constantly challenging yourself mentally with books, with companies, podcasts, but you've been doing that since a young boy.
Correct.
Just challenging yourself, putting yourself through whatever it takes to get what you want to do to make yourself happy, which is, I think, the key takeaway for people listening. Like you, obviously, you have so much to share. Is there one place that people listening could go to sort of immerse themselves? I've been to your site, but is that the best place for johnabrink.com?
Yeah, johnabrink.com is the right one, and then the other one is podcasting. I'm on all the major medias. On the Brink with John A. Brink, is on all the podcasting is on YouTube and all the other major medias, and then all the books are available on all the other medias as well as ebooks, audio ones, and all of them. And they all kind of deal with the same issues. The Against All Odds is interesting. It's not all about how successful John is, just the opposite, actually. Going through all the ups and downs. ADHD was one that I felt I had an obligation to write it because of my history, and I believe it's an asset, it's not a liability. And finding your passion for all the reasons that we talked about is so critically important. A lot of people don't like their jobs, and that's not healthy. And then the other one is fitness, living young, dying old. And then the other one, communication skills, critically important. And they have been to me, but they were not always. And I felt I had to write about that. And in this book, I particularly want to know about 7 of major success stories, multi-billionaires. That includes all the Buffett, Branson, Gates, and on and on and on. To see what their experience was starting companies and then going through the tough times, and how important, in particular, is communication skills. That's why I wrote this book. It's coming out in June. It's going to be an amazing book, but it follows all the other ones that I'm doing and basically lays out me and my life and where I believe people will be successful. The other part about that I believe is important that I found is that with ADHD, that initially I thought maybe 8% of the population, and the more I thought about it, I thought it's much higher than that, and it's a superpower. And then I interviewed Dr. Hollywell on my podcast. He said it's between, where I said it's 20%, male, female. Females presented different than males, but between the populations. Then obviously with entrepreneurs and successful business people, it's more like 75%. On the overall, I believe globally, it's probably 30% of the population, ADHD, and maybe dyslexia or other issues that are related to that same categories. And I felt I had to write about that and speak about it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'll make sure all this, johnabrink.com is the place to visit. Everything's in the show notes. I appreciate your time. Great to meet you. Great to learn from you, learn about your story. Just thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Joe. It was a pleasure.